We have another wonderful guest. His name is Mr. Steve King. He has his professional work is directly connected from across many continents, a global education specialist with over 2 decades of experience leading large scale education reform, policy development, and international learning initiatives. So, let's have a small chit chat session with him and let's get to know more about him. So, first of all, hey there, Mr. Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you today.
It's an honor to host you, Mr. Steve. So, first of all, I'd like to ask you, I'd like to request you, since I've already introduced you, if you would like to add anything to your introduction so our viewers could get to know more about you.
Yeah. Like you said, I've worked in education for about 20, 25 years. I've worked in Asia, based in Japan. Then I was in the United States in the Greater Boston area for 5 or 6 years. And for the last 8 years, I've been based in Cambridge, working for what is now Cambridge University Press and Assessment, part of the University of Cambridge. And I work in education reform, currently responsible for Europe, Central Asia, and the Americas. So that's all been quite a journey. But it's interesting work and I like it.
All right, that's wonderful to know that for 20 years you've been pursuing in your career. So, first of all, I'd like to ask you, how has assessment design evolved over the past 2 decades, and how do you see it evolving in the future?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question in terms of assessment. I mean, assessment, of course, is linked closely to curriculum, and it's also linked closely to teaching and learning in the classroom, and it's linked closely to learning resources. But I think in the countries where I've been working over the last 8 years in particular, there's been a big shift from the assessment of knowledge, the assessment of facts, so knowledge-based assessment, more towards the assessment of competencies and the assessment of things like problem solving, critical thinking, those types of things. And of course, you've got other terms like 21st century skills that you might use. Obviously, going into the future, it will come as no surprise to hear me say that I think you'll see more online assessment, more on-screen assessment, as well as marking and grading. But at the end of the day, assessment is there to measure what the students have learned and what they can do, right? And in that sense, it hasn't changed and will not change.
All right, so that's wonderful to know. So since you've mentioned that the the evolvement of assessment design would not change, so since AI is taking over AI and technology is taking over the world, how what do you think? In what ways will AI help us build new and better type of assessment designs?
Yeah, so I think when you say that AI is taking over the world, I'm not sure if I agree with that. Right? So, um, or at least I hope that doesn't become true, right? So, I
Right.
think in the world of assessment and the world of education, we have to be mindful of what makes us uniquely human, right? And we have to think about what humans bring that artificial intelligence or machines cannot do. And I don't think AI is in a place yet where it takes over the world. And in fact, I hope that day doesn't come. And I think that humans will always be at the heart of education systems and teaching and learning and even the economy, the wider economy, right? So that's what I'd like to see, right? Of course, there are aspects of AI that can be advantageous, in terms of being able to grade things quickly, or even being able to assist in writing of questions and that kind of thing. Um, but I would just gently challenge the idea that AI is taking over the world.
All right, that's great to hear. I've never seen someone disagreeing on the takeover of AI in the world. So, since you are working in the industry of education, in which sectors do you think that AI will take a major role to like enroll that sector or blow that sector up so it could become more popular and it would the shape of it would look more better with the help of AI?
Yeah. So let's stay within education just for a minute, right? And I think that AI will bring many advantages, potentially in terms of reducing the amount of bureaucracy that that a school has, that a family has to contend with in dealing with an education system, at a university. Um, and then beyond that into academic research and into the sort of the wider world of advancing human knowledge. I think that there are ways in which AI can make things easier for humans to research things, to teach things, to learn things, and also, yes, to assess things. Um, there probably will be, sectors of the economy in which AI becomes, the first thing that you look at, just as 200 years ago we looked at the Industrial Revolution, right? Um, 200 years ago it was the steam engine and automation of industry and manufacturing. And you think about that trajectory, and maybe you're looking at industries where a machine is there primarily to do the work, but needs human control. And you think about driving, transport, with the advent of automated um, machines to move people around. Maybe transport is one industry where you would look to AI first. But I'm not a futurologist. I don't predict the future. That's just one thought that I would have.
That's great to know to have your one thought. So it's great to know that you still see that AI will be taking a major role in some sectors in education. So now that you have already worked in Uzbekistan, so what lessons has it taught you about sustainable education?
Yeah. So in Uzbekistan, we've worked in all parts of the system, right? From pre-primary education to primary, secondary, and university education. And we've worked across curriculum, assessment, learning materials, and teacher training, right? And the most sustainable way to work through that is for local empowerment, to make sure that the solutions, um, or the projects or the work that we are doing is owned and is unique to local people as much as possible, right? So, for example, if we work on the national curriculum, that national curriculum needs to be world class and it needs to meet international standards, but it also needs to be unique to the local cultural context and the needs of the economy. And it needs to be owned by local stakeholders, right? So, it's not about Cambridge or anybody else bringing in their own curriculum and just copy and pasting it onto Uzbekistan, but it's about ensuring that the work being done is owned locally as much as possible. That, I think, is at the heart of sustainable education transformation.
All right, that's inspiring to hear that you recommend bringing your type of education as well as trying to match it with the culture and let it be or make sure that it's owned by local authorities. So that's insightful to hear. So, how do you measure the real impact of international education projects beyond reports and metrics?
Yeah, so that's where you get that's where some of the bureaucracy comes in, right? Because you can work for many years in an education program, and you can develop, or it is possible to develop, an obsessiveness with monitoring and evaluation and the sort of the measure of the effectiveness of that, and that can be a very costly and a very time-consuming process in and of itself. And I understand why it's done. You know, international organizations who invest money into an education system need to be able to measure their results, right? And you get, you know, baseline, and you get target outcomes, and there's a process by which, you know, you can show that the work you have done has been cost effective. What I prefer and what I've seen is, you know, the human impact of the work that we do. So to give you one example, 6 years ago, we started work with the Uzbekistan presidential schools, right? And then last year and the year before, I was able to go to the graduation ceremonies of the students who had started 6 years ago. And I could see the change between the students I saw coming to the entrance examination in 2019 and the graduation ceremony of 2025. And that was a visible and easy to mark shift and change in those students. And I was able to have some focus groups with those students and talk to them and see what the impact of that project had been on their actual tangible lives. So that was a really good way to sort of be able to measure the impact and to see its effect.
All right, thank you so much for telling us that detailed process on like how you see the change of the students who joined 6 years ago and who are graduating 6 years later. And thank you so much for explaining the process very detailed in a very detailed way. So now I'd like to ask you that what skills do education leaders lack the most nowadays?
Yeah, so I think, you know, it's important not to look at it through the lens of deficiency, right? So, you know, I prefer not to think about, you know, what do people lack, um, but I tend to think about it in terms of what more can people be doing, right? In addition to what they already do. Um, One thing I would recommend for any education system leader is to look at their education system as a whole, right? And as it all fits together. So looking not only at assessment or not only at, you know, AI in education or climate education or on curriculum, but looking at how curriculum, assessment, learning materials, um, teachers fit together in a cohesive way, and also looking how pre-primary education leads to primary, secondary, and university education, and looking at the bigger picture and looking at how all of those fit together sequentially and cohesively. That would be my take on that.
All right, so that's good. That's great to hear your side about the lacking of education leaders. Like you don't see it in the lack way, you see it in the way in where they can improve. So now that we're in the education leaders talk, so what's the skills should education leaders have nowadays? What are the most important skills that they should have nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you mean by leaders, right? So a school leader, a school director, needs a different set of skills to somebody who's running an examination authority, or somebody who is the head of a department at the Ministry of Education responsible for a technical area, or a minister, or somebody who is outside of the system but working for an international organization, right? All of those different roles require a lot of skills, right? So for myself, I'm working for what is an international organization that sits outside of the education systems we work in. So, someone like myself would need a different type of leadership skill to the minister of a given jurisdiction, right? I would, of course, need good listening, empathy, diplomacy. I would need to have good, stakeholder management, and I would need to have good, analytical skills. Whereas a minister may need different skills for him or herself.
All right, so that's a good take on the skills which they should have, which they have nowadays, which they should have nowadays. So, how important is a stakeholders trust? How important is stakeholders trust while working with local ministries or authorities?
Yeah, obviously it's very important, but one thing to always remember is when you're working with a local education authority, a ministry of education, for example, the relationship that is being developed is with the ministry as a whole. It is not only with the minister, right? So, I've seen international organizations and people working for them who will kind of chase a relationship with the minister for education only, because it's perceived that that individual is the only decision maker, right, or is the most important person, or is the only one who can make things happen. Actually, in any ministry of education, you've got a large network of people at the senior level, at the middle level, at all levels, who can affect policy, they can affect change, they can affect programs and projects, they can affect budgets, they can affect timelines, everything. So the relationship that you cultivate should be with the ministry as an institution rather than the minister as an individual. That would be my advice to anybody working with ministries of education.
All right, all right. That's a important take on yours. So, looking back at the younger self of Mr. Steve King, what would you say to him? What if you would look at your younger self now? What are the things which you would see, which you learned later, which you should have learned in your childhood? So, what's one word you would say to your younger self, and why?
Yeah, I think my younger self progressed from teaching into working in a functional area, which was publishing, and I worked in Japan, and then I started to work internationally and started to work in more areas, and I was primarily working in English language teaching, and now I work in general education. So, I would say to him that it will be better to make the transition from one subject area to general education more quickly, because I found it more fulfilling. Um, I found it way better for me to work in the whole of education rather than just in English language education. But to young professionals looking to work in international education, I would say you really have to commit to it. It's not something you do for 2 or 3 years and then move on. Any kind of education program is multi-year and requires a lot of commitment. I would advise them to read a lot, read about the types of countries you want to work in, including, their literature and non-fiction aspects of what you can read. Listen to colleagues, particularly technical colleagues. It's really good to be able to pick up so much expertise from people who are real experts in assessment, in curriculum design, in textbook design, in teacher training, and you can really learn a lot from others if you take the time to sit back and listen to the expertise that they give. that's certainly what I've done. I don't have a master's degree in education, but over the years, through listening to colleagues and working with them, it's possible to pick up a good working knowledge of how an education system works, and I would encourage people to do that.
All right. So thank you so much for your important and your very much clarified take. And it was really um, amazing to see what you would say to your younger self. So, what personal leadership principle guide? What do they guide in your decision making? What role do they play?
Yeah, so if I'm working in a sort of a leadership capacity in anything, I guess there are kind of two principles to it. One would be to say, look, I would never ask somebody to do something that I wasn't prepared to do myself. To travel at short notice, to travel large distances, to work beyond 5 o'clock, to work beyond 8 o'clock. Right? I wouldn't ask someone to do that if I wasn't prepared to do it myself. And the other thing is, working in international projects and programs in multiple jurisdictions, sometimes they just stop, right? Sometimes they are a bubble that just bursts. So one principle I always apply is, if a bubble bursts, blow another one, find another one to do, right? Don't dwell on things that have a pause or a stop. Just keep working and moving on to the next.
All right. So that's thank you so much for your wonderful take. So since you mentioned about if the bubble pops, find another way. So if you have experienced something like this, what way would you like to give to those education leaders or whatsoever the industry is? What type of technique you would give to them so that the balloon could blow up more quickly?
Yeah, so I think again it's about thinking long term, right? And thinking that not everything leads to a quick win, right? So if you think about something like early childhood education, right? The World Bank and other international organizations show and demonstrate that investing in early childhood education produces big returns on investment. But by definition, investing in 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds doesn't bring returns on investment the next day. It brings returns on investment in 10 or 15 years, right? Or in the short term, it can bring returns on investment in terms of, parents being able to get into the workplace more easily, but it doesn't bring quick wins. And, so I would encourage system leaders to think beyond their current term of office, think beyond the current term of their government, right? And what kind of legacy they want to leave and want to be continued by the next minister or into the next government of the country. So making sure a bubble doesn't burst is thinking about continuity and thinking about targeted long-term effort into improving a given area of an education system.
All right. So, from my take from this is that you mean when a bubble is about to pop, before it pops in advance, as in the term of reputation, find the things which would make the bubble stay blown and not pop again more longer. So, thank you so much for that. So, if you
Okay.
could
Yeah.
change, yeah, if you'd like to add anything,
No, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah.
thank you.
If I could
So,
change,
yeah, if you could change one thing about how education reform is done globally, what would it be?
over the last sort of 20 years, I've developed quite an aversion to bureaucracy. I don't like it. I know why it exists, and I know why there needs to be governance, and I know why there needs to be process and procedures and rules. But I think a lot of the time within education systems and within governments in general, you do see a lot of bureaucracy. And, I hope that, or what I would change if I could, would be that there would be less, and there would be more of a focus on, what the human benefit to education is, and what the potential growth is for children's future, and what the potential is for teachers to expand and enjoy their work more. And I think all of those would be well served by the bureaucratic machine just being a bit slimmer, and being a bit more easier to work with. And maybe that's something that AI, as you started to talk about, will be able to help us to solve in the near future.
All right, so thank you so much for telling us how you would like to change the educational reform done globally, and thank you so much for highlighting AI in this. So, lastly, before ending our wonderful session, it was a great time chatting with
Mhm.
you, Mr. Steve. What advice would you like to give to those educationists so they could take it as some tips and tricks from you and try to implement them in their education system?
Yeah, I think every education system that I've seen, whether it's in the former Soviet Union, Latin America, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Asia, wants to have a world-class curriculum. They want to have fair, valid, and reliable and internationally recognized examinations. They want to have high quality teaching and learning materials. And they want to have well-trained, highly skilled, and motivated teachers. All of those things is achievable by every country. And there is nothing about any country's cultural context, economy, that prevents that from happening in any country. And so what I would like people to think is that maybe it's true that in a given country they don't have those things. But that does not mean that those things are not achievable. They are achievable, and they are within reach by any country, and they are accessible by any child, by any parent, by any teacher. So just think about the possible. It is possible for any education system to have a world-class curriculum, internationally recognized exams, well-trained, highly skilled teachers, and good quality learning materials. That should be available to all.
All right. So um, the basic thought of this is it should be pure dedication from the educationists, if I'm right.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for your thorough analysis, and thank you so much for coming on Wired and Inspired and sharing your journey of being an education leader from the past 2 decades. So thank you so much for joining us. It was a wonderful time chatting with you. And anything you'd like to say in the last of our interview?
No, I mean, thank you, and thank you to anybody who's been able to listen. I'm on LinkedIn. People can find me if they want, and I'm happy to take messages or any comments. So thank you.
Thank you. So yes, everyone, his LinkedIn profile will be pasted in the description, so you guys could reach out to him. So he was our guest, Mr. Steve King, who is actually the king of education. So it was a wonderful time chatting with him, and really loved to know about his journey. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Wired and Inspired. I'll meet you with another guest. Till then, stay wired to be inspired. Goodbye.